All right, it's Wednesday night. My name is Keith Hooper. I'm here in Central California. We're joined by our good friend, Dr. Barry White out of Ontario, Canada. Good evening, Dr. White.
Good evening, Keith.
And we're also joined by our good friend, Doug LeClaire, this evening. Good evening, Doug.
Good evening, Keith.
And as always on these Wednesday night calls, we want to put the caveats in. The products from Immunotech research do not cure anything, but as Hippocrates said some 2,500 years ago, let food be thy medicine. And Immunical is simply the most important food you can use, as well as our Immunical Platinum and Sport and our other great products here from Immunotech Research. These Wednesday night calls are around the format of the science. What does science say that Immunical will do for particular issues? Tonight we're going to be talking about autoimmune diseases and how Immunical affects that, what the science says about it, and then I have a very good friend for many, many years, as I was teasing him today, that's even older than me, but only by a couple of months. But I got a good friend, Ed Lacey, will be joining us here in just a couple of minutes to share how that works with these autoimmunes. But you know, autoimmune issues, Dr. White, as we were talking about earlier today, is everything from alopecia with hair loss all the way to Parkinson's and lupus and all these other things in the middle. I mean, people with certain kind of arthritis that's affected by autoimmune. It's just a pretty encompassing issue that people are dealing with, right?
Right, and it's triggered often because your glutathione levels, your immune system, is gotten too low, and it triggers all sorts of defenses. The body assumes that you're under attack when you're not, just because things are out of whack. So this is where Immunical really comes in to help.
So when we look at this autoimmune situation, and so what we talk about it is that the body is out of balance, but the science from Immunotech says that we affect that. We balance out the immune system. We affect these autoimmune deficiencies, if you will, just like the research that was done regarding the AIDS patients. Okay, I mean, I think that's probably the most profound information out there is AIDS. And, you know, Immunical and what we did with the AIDS family and the AIDS research, Immunical works on autoimmune deficiencies, right?
Yeah, simply because being out of balance means that the whole system has gone. Your food system over the past how many years you're living has not been sufficient to meet your needs. And so you have to find an outside source, food, that'll bring your body back to balance. And this is one of the major things that Immunical does, is help bring your body back to balance.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Doug, we look at the science from Immunotech because, once again, unless it's double blind, which means that neither the doctors that are doing the study nor the patients that are receiving the product know if they're getting a placebo or the real product, and at the end of that research is then submitted to a peer review group of people who peer review it, and then submitted to a medical publication which accepts that information and then published in a peer review journal. Unless it goes through those processes, it's simply somebody's opinion, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really, to understand the depth of some of that published research, the Journal of Applied Physiology had received 30,000 articles for publication, and they only accept likely about 7 or 8%, and we were selected in that group to be published in that journal. So there are many submitted, and and quite a number of them rejected. So it shows somebody's calling. I'll get that. No, hold on. It's not my phone. But anyways, it just shows the depth and the credibility of the research and the thoroughness that Immunotech did to submit that. So very exciting.
Yeah, well, and to that point, you know, without that kind of research, there's so much of this stuff that is simply a placebo effect. And, you know, so just because somebody uses something and gets a benefit from it doesn't mean that the product actually did anything. There's the psychological part. There's all kinds of other things that enter into it. At whatever the person's using or consuming may have had little to no effect on them. Okay, and that's what separates Immunotech. So when someone has, for example, what we're talking about is an autoimmune deficiency issue, okay, are out of balance. The research says if you take Immunotech, you can expect a certain result, and that really separates us, right, Bob? Or right, Doug?
Absolutely, Keith. I'm sure
So,
Bob would agree as well.
and Bob would agree with that as well, okay? But it's important when we're talking with family members and friends that they understand this. What, we're not talking about, just something that's not scientifically validated, something that's just, like every other nutritional product when you walk into a health food store or, go to a farmer's market or you go online, for heaven's sake, okay? And people make outlandish claims. We're talking about products that actually have patents of use for certain issues, as well as clinical research and a lot of other issues, and that really makes a difference with what we've got here. But what really matters with that is how do we take that information, how do we take that science, and how does it apply to people that we care about? Friends, family, those people that are close to us. How does it affect? And is that, so the science says if you take Immunical with an autoimmune deficiency issue, and you start to use Immunical, that you should expect a certain result. So what does that look like? And I think a perfect example of that is my friend Ed Lacey that's joined us tonight. And Ed and I have been friends for many years, and as we were talking today, I think he's been using Immunical for something like 22 to 24 years. So Ed Lacey is out of Chowchilla, California, a few miles from here. He's a good friend of mine, and he and his wife Valerie are friends of Sandra's and I for many, many years. And Ed, you got some great results from Immunical all those years ago, right?
I do believe. Good evening, everybody. As Keith alluded earlier, winter is about to hit us here in the Central Valley by a rainstorm. And I'm going to preface my little talk to you by telling you that in getting ready for this rain, I have a 40-foot motorhome that I had to prepare for the weather. I was on top of a 40-foot motorhome about an hour ago, covering it with a tarp to keep it dry, keep the elements off of it. I tell you that because about 22 years ago, I was diagnosed with systemic lupus. And, of course, I went to see my doctor, and that's where I got my diagnosis from. He told me that he had two pieces of information for me in the form of news, one good news, one bad news, Keith. And he said that the bad news was I had systemic lupus. And the good news was he had drugs that could remedy or at least mitigate the pain I was suffering at that time. I was working full-time job. I was living in a two-story house. I was forced to retire from work early, and I was forced to move my master bedroom suite from the second story down to the first floor because I could no longer navigate the stairs without pain, and I could not work without having to take several days off in a row. I had been working with Keith, as he alluded earlier. We had been doing several projects together, and I had seen him mixing this concoction daily. I didn't ask what it was, and he didn't volunteer to tell me until I told him about my diagnosis. And that's when he told me about Immunical. And that was in 2001, I believe. The doctor told me, I told you the story about me being on top of a 40-foot motorhome because the doctor told me that the drugs would kind of ease the pain, take care of the swelling and the inflammation and all that kind of stuff. But the bad news is that in time, it's going to tear my organs up on the inside. And 21 years later, I'm on top of a motorhome covering it with a tarp with no systems, no systematic ailments of lupus since I've been on Immunical, and that's been over 20 years. And I'm blessed that somebody cared enough about me to have told me about it. And that person was Keith Hoover.
Well, Ed, when you went to Stanford, I remember the story that you told that the doctor looked at your blood work and looked at you and thought that the blood work didn't belong to you, right?
Right. Now, that was after I fired the local doctor because I told him that he said, your lupus is systemic, which means it's in every part of your body, and you need to be on these anti-inflammatory drugs. I said, wait a minute. I've got a friend who told me about this product, this homeopathic method I could try, and I'd like to try that first, and then come back and see you and see what you think about the results. So I did. Went on it for 60 days, and came back to see him, and he said, so, Edgar, what are you here for today? I said, well, you're following up on, I was taking the Munical for the last 60 days, and you're going to look at my chart and tell me what's what. So he said, oh, okay, I remember. Your numbers went down, but you still have lupus. I said, so that means when the numbers go down, that means that lupus got worse? Or he says, no. Whenever the numbers go down, that's always a good thing. And he said it with such an attitude and an arrogance. I said, well, I didn't know that. I'm asking you because you're my physician. So I tell you what, if they went down, and as a matter of fact, I'm no longer suffering. I'm not in the pain I was. No more swelling. I'm back in my bedroom upstairs. But I'm not back at work yet. So I said, I'll tell you what, I want to give it another 60 days and come back and see you again. And he said, well, I don't think that's a good idea. I think you need to be on these anti-inflammatories. I said, okay, so if I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be dead in 20 years. He said, well, anything that you take routinely, including aspirin, if you take it long enough, it's going to have the same effects on your insides. I said, not a Munical. He said, well, I don't know about that stuff. I said, well, let me try another 60 days and come back and see you. He disagreed, so we parted company that day. I got an appointment with Stanford Medical Center and Medical University, and I went there. This was about 60 days later. The physician that saw me there, I think she was a rheumatologist, I'm not certain, but she looked at me and said, Mr. Lacey, looking at you and looking at this chart, they don't match. Your record says one thing, your body says another. And whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. And again, that was over 20 years ago.
So, Ed, would you recommend that people give it a try and see what it'll do for them?
I have been recommending it for over 20 years. Some will gravitate towards it, some won't, but it's my job to just tell them about it. And yes, absolutely. I have done, and I will continue to tell people about this amazing product God sent.
Well, thank you, Ed. I really appreciate you being here. And hopefully everyone paid close attention to that. So, Dr. White, as we look at that, that's, once again, the science says on an autoimmune situation, Immunical is going to help. And here we have my friend Edgar Lacey that got those results, right?
Yeah, I got the results. The interesting part is the lupus is still there, but the symptoms, the bad stuff, is not. That's what the doctor was saying. So once here's the kicker part of the thing, for people who get into these autoimmune diseases, the disease may stay there for life, but the Immunical may take care of the symptoms so that physically you're not aware of the damage of the disease. So that is double, not just interesting, that's so encouraging that people who are afflicted with an autoimmune disorder, and a whole bunch of them, that with Immunical, they may not have the symptoms even though the disease is still in their body. That's astounding, absolutely astounding.
Absolutely. Well, Doug, you got anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'm just thinking about a few examples of people I know that had that things just gone for life. I know Juliet's story, and Juliet is listening in tonight. I've got my cell phone parked on next to the speaker. But anyways, she was having a lot of difficulty. Like she taught yoga. She probably overdid it, but within a very short period of time, the pain went away and it never came back. So she thought she was, would have extreme osteoporosis for life, but it just gone, just like Ed's story, just amazing. And my mom, the doctor called her in and said, we lost your blood test because, like was said, the results of the blood test, they just don't match. They just don't match. So Dr. Barry White said something, pretty interesting in that your body gets back to normal. But I have experienced a few people that would get off Immunical and they may start to experience those symptoms again. So it doesn't happen all the time, but I always encourage people, just keep taking it. It's nature's food. It's a gift from God. And We have all the science. We have peer-reviewed papers and randomized, controlled, double-blind, and it just keeps going on and on. And of course, we've just finished the Alzheimer's studies. We've just finished the research on the brain with respect to Dr. Daniel Linsman's work. So, yeah, everything is looking awesome, and I appreciate the story. What a great story, and thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ed, for being with us. Once again, it's Wednesday night. We're going to go ahead and go over to the part that won't be on the YouTube video. You can join us every Wednesday night. Get back with the person that invited you with the video, and they'll give you the info on how to join us. Once again, the products of Immunotech research do not cure anything, but Hippocrates said some 2,500 years ago, let food be thy medicine. Simply the most important food you can use, Immunocal Platinum, as well as other great products. All right, now we're going into the part that it will be up on the audio recording. That's up until next week, but on the video that we make, this continuing part won't be there. But, you know, Dr. White, we were talking about alopecia and with a young man. And so these autoimmune things are across, you know, everything from arthritis to Parkinson's to lupus to you know, this alopecia issue with the hair loss. There's just so many things that are covered by this. And, you know, here's this simple white powder that's a gift from God that has such an impact, right?
Thank you.